Hello and welcome to the video on how to import EVT Pro data to the ValvKeep software. Before we get into the actual process, I want to take just a quick second and talk briefly about what it is that we're importing. Here you'll notice that I have Windows Explorer open and I've navigated to the folder where the data is that I'm going to be importing from the EVT Pro. There's two components. The first is the actual literal text file that has the valves in it, or the test certificates from the EVT software, and the other files are the PDF test reports that were generated by the EVT program. Both of these are imported into ValvKeep. The PDFs are attached as generic attachments to that event, and the repair data or the test data is brought in from this actual text file. So all of these files are required from the EVT export, and they are all automatically generated during the EVT export. So this would either be a memory stick that we've plugged into the ValvKeep computer onto which we did the export, or this would be a shared folder between the ValvKeep and EVT programs on the EVT Pro computer. So that's just a brief look at what it is that we're going to be bringing in. I'll close out of that Windows Explorer, we'll come back to ValvKeep, and we'll now start talking about the process to import the EVT Pro data. As usual, the first step is to choose the owner and plant into which we want to bring the data. In this case, I'm going to bring it into the plant of Houston of Westfield Energy Corporation. Double-clicking on it in the tree brings me to the grid, and you can see all of the valves that I currently have in this customer. There's two ways that I can bring in the data. The first way is to do it when I'm inside the details form. And this makes sense if you were literally typing the data in and at one point you wanted to bring in the EVT data. So imagine that you were busy working on documenting the repair and you knew you had a memory stick on which the EVT data was sitting and you wanted to import it. So you would be inside the details forms, you'd be working your way through all of the tabs, inputting the data into the details form, and then you would want to do the EVT import. Up here in the top right, you'll see there's an EVT import button. If I click that, I can then choose EVT Pro or the older EVT, and clicking EVT Pro brings me into the import command for that. I'm going to close out of it here, and I'm going to come back to the grid, and I'm going to show the other way to do it. The import is the same once you get to that form regardless of how you go in. It can either be done from the details or it can be done from the main menu. Performing the import from the main menu involves you going up to the File, down to Import, down to Import from other dresser applications, to EVT Import, to EVT Pro. Choosing that brings me to the EVT Pro import screen, which is the same that we saw when I accessed this command from the details form. The first step in the process is to find the file that we want to import. Clicking the Find Load button brings me to the Windows dialog that allows me to navigate either to the memory stick on which the EVT Pro data is, or out to the shared file if this computer has both the EVT and ValvKeep software on it. Here you'll notice that I am using the shared file. Clicking it brings me the list of EVT imports that I can choose from, and I'll double click on one of them to bring it in. When I choose the file, ValvKeep tells me that it has loaded the map that is the connection of the EVT Pro data to the ValvKeep data. This is done by default automatically for you. I'll go ahead and click OK, and it brings me into the standard import screen. Let's talk briefly about the import screen. Over here on the left hand side is the data map. The data map is created by you, and it is where you define where the data being brought in, where it goes into inside of ValvKeep. For the EVT Pro import, this is done for you by default, and these fields are already chosen. If your template has changed where you're putting data, you can go ahead and you can modify this map, place the information into the proper ValvKeep field. We won't talk much more about maps here, as there are other videos and PDFs that thoroughly describe how to create the data map. But the important thing to know is that this map is defined by you. This map is used in both the import and the export commands for EVT Pro and ValvKeep data, and this map is critical in order to have the data coming in properly and going out properly. Again, by default, it is set up the way that it needs to be, and it's unlikely you will need to change it. Over here in the lower right part of the import screen is the data that's actually being brought in. This has been read from the text file, and these are the 6 valves that we are going to be importing, or we can choose to import from. A couple of the things we can do over here allow us to manipulate what's being brought in. The most obvious is I can double click a record in order not to bring it in. So double clicking it here highlights it or draws a red line through it, and these two items now would not be involved in any import that I would be performing. The other thing that I can do here is I can edit the data inside of this grid if I wanted to fine tune it. In order to edit the data, I first need to click the Allow Grid Editing button. When that is clicked, I can now come in and I can change the data as I need inside of this grid before the data is read into the ValvKeep software. In the case of importing EVT data, it is unlikely that I'm going to do anything more than simply load the EVT file I'm trying to import. If you do make any changes to the data map, when you save them by clicking the Save button, those changes will be loaded in the next time you do an EVT import, so you shouldn't have to make the change more than once. This is ideal to have a single map file that is used over and over again. As well as not making any changes to the file that has been read in's map, I also likely wouldn't make any changes to the actual data being put into the ValvKeep valves. The one thing that we might end up doing, depending on how we're bringing in the EVT data, is just select the valve that we want to bring in. Let's imagine for a moment that we were working on a specific repair for a specific valve, and we were in the details form when we went into the EVT Pro import. So you were there typing in the data to the details form, and you knew you wanted to import that single specific valve's EVT test. In that instance, when you click the EVT link in the details form and you came to this screen, selected the file, had the default map loaded, and then saw all of the valves in the EVT file here displayed in this grid, you would want to be on the one single valve that you were working on, and that way when you import that single valve's data, it'll already be selected in the grid for you. When you're ready, go ahead and click the Import button. That will tell you that the valve size will be properly handled when it's brought in from the EVT file, and then you'll be asked to choose the one of two ways that you want to bring in the EVT data. The first way, and what this question is asking us now, is do you want to bring the EVT test that I'm on inside of the grid here, do you want to bring that into the single valve that I'm working on right now in ValvKeep? So if you imagine that I was on the details form of a specific repair working on it, and it came to the point in time when I wanted to import the EVT data, so I clicked on the EVT import button in the details form, that would be the specific valve that I was working on. I would find that specific valve inside of the EVT file, I would be on it, and then I would click Import. Upon clicking Import, it asks if I want to actually marry this EVT test to the valve that I was specifically on inside of ValvKeep. So basically what this is allowing us to do is bring in one single test to one single specific valve. If I answer no to that question, I can choose the other import method of the EVT data, which is the smart import of the EVT data. What that means is that all of the valves inside of the EVT file, all of those valves will be looked for inside of the current ValvKeep owner and plant. If the valve is found by the serial number or the tag number inside of the EVT data, if that valve is found, the data for the test will be edited into the existing most recent event for that valve in ValvKeep. If the tag number or serial number is not found, the valve will be added to ValvKeep as a new to ValvKeep valve. So if you think about this for a moment, what it's really doing is it's looking for the EVT Pro valves inside of ValvKeep. If the valve is not found, it is added as a new to VK valve. If the valve is found, the data is edited into the repair event you've already created for that valve inside of ValvKeep. ValvKeep does not create new repair events for an EVT Pro test. The assumption is you will have already created the new repair event for the valve, and you will be working in it, and at some point you will want to bring data into that repair event. So either the valve is added to ValvKeep, or you're actually going to be editing the data into the existing repair event for ValvKeep. So let's go ahead and say yes, that we want it to do the smart import. It says, do you want to bring in the 6 tests from the EVT file? We'll say yes, we will, but first let's take a look and let's notice that there's already one valve inside of the owner and plant that we are working in. So that one valve is going to have these 6 EVT tests looked at and brought in intelligently. I'll go ahead and I'll say yes, and the data is brought in. Now, as we previously discussed, the PDF file that the EVT Pro software created, that is the EVT Pro test, it is going to be added to the generic attachments for that repair event, and that will be done automatically by ValvKeep. What's happening here is ValvKeep found a valve inside of its grid that was also inside of the EVT data. So the tag number VLRS4003 was already inside of ValvKeep. So what it's doing is it's going to bring the EVT Pro data in as a test to that already existing valve. So we had one valve. That valve was found inside of the EVT Pro data. So of the 6 EVT tests that brought in, 5 of them were new valves to ValvKeep, 1 was an existing one. And when I close out of my import, which has now been performed, you'll see here in my grid that we have the 6 valves, and 1 of them was already found, 5 were added as new to ValvKeep valves. We'll take one quick look at the generic attachment that was added that was the test. I'm going to click on one of the valves, in this case the VLRS 4003 tag number. This incidentally was the valve that was already in ValvKeep when we brought in the EVT data. I will go to the generic commands, and here you see that we have the EVT Pro document attached to it. If I open it up, the PDF file will be sent to Windows. Windows will open it and it will display to me the EVT test report. So that is how the generic attachments end up automatically having the EVT Pro tests. They get added to the generic attachments, and you'll notice that it actually is added as a document to the repair, as it should be. That's it. That concludes the video on how to bring in EVT Pro data. Thanks and goodbye.